Good morning, William. This is Mr. Jones. Yes, I wanted to ask Rabbi Singer about that passage in John that says, greater things than these shall ye do also, because I go back to my Father. And I was wondering what apologetics Christians have to that, because I don't think anyone believes that anybody's greater than Jesus. And so he supposedly said himself that that would be the case. And what accounts that they use to point to say that that actually happened. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Interesting. All right, take it away.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the inference there is that if Jesus was fully God and he was the second person of the triune Godhead, and he was co-eternal with God, and he did not cease to be divine while he was a human. So what did the author of the book of John think? Well, bear in mind that the author of the book of John did not believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. So that's really important. As it turns out, Christians would say about John, it's at John 14, verse 12, that after the ascension, the disciples will be able to do many great works, even more than had been displayed by Jesus during his life. It goes without saying that none of these things that we're encountering in the book of John will you find in the synoptic Gospels, meaning the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It probably would surprise you that about 90% of the book of John is found nowhere in the earlier Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So whoever edits, authors the fourth Gospel, well, he's certainly editing ideas that were in the Joannian community. The views were really quite different than we find in the Synoptic Gospels. But this shouldn't surprise you. After all, in John 20, which is after the putative resurrection, Jesus breathes on his disciples and tells them that now they will be able to do all the things that Jesus did, including performing miracles, forgiving sin, which is very striking. It should strike you as odd because Christians frequently point to Jesus' ability or perceived ability of forgiving sins. That's a demonstration that books like Mark, the earliest of the four Gospels, believe that Jesus was fully God, and that's not correct at all. Another thing, of course, we discover is that the New Testament is not univocal. Each of the books has a different, it's not just a different voice, but a contradictory voice. That all said, I'm really, surprised you didn't go further on the chapter in John chapter 14, where Jesus actually says in verse 28 that he is going to his Father because the Father is greater than I am. The Father is greater than I am. So it's very clear that the author of the book of John held that Jesus was subordinate to the Father, but was of the same agency as the Father. So before Abraham was, I am. But that unity is an agency, not an actual material substance. The Father, I and the Father are one, John 10. That means they're of the same purpose and same agency. They're not materially the same. And therefore, in the farewell discourse, which stretches from chapter 13 to 17, it's the longest conversation in the entire New Testament by far. Jesus, toward the end, prays to God, asking of God that his disciples, the followers, should be one as we, meaning God the Father, and Jesus are one. So it's so transparent what is happening here. However, it also is very clear what direction the church would take given these sort of passages. And it would require early church fathers like the Bishop of Antioch, Ignatius, of just outright stating that Jesus was God. He lives really shortly after the New Testament is written. I mean, he is presiding as bishop in Antioch in the early 2nd century. So you could see the development where Jesus is going from a God-like figure. He's the Word in the opening passage of the book of John, but he's not God. He is a God. In our world, that would sound like something odd, but in the ancient world meant you were divine in some way. You were not God. You did the will of God. And in fact, we are told in the book of John, explicitly in John chapter 5, verse 30, that Jesus on earth does not do or does not perform, does not carry out his own will, but rather only the will of the one who sent me. You follow? And I mean, that's explicit in the 4th gospel, which is the most highly developed of the 4 gospels, that Jesus' will is not the same will as the Father, but rather Jesus is subordinate to the Father and performs the will of the Father, not his own will. And we find in the Synoptic Gospels a similar theme, just not as well developed, where Jesus' will is not the same as the will of the Father. Take this cup, not of my will, but of your will. That's essentially the prayer we're told that Jesus offers up right as we approach the Passion narratives. As Jesus saying, could we stop this show? Take this cup from me. So what is occurring in the 2nd century is that Jesus' status is elevated more and more to a more and more divine state. At the end of the 2nd century, about, let's say, the year 200, a church thinker and highly influential Latin Christian doctor, his name is Tertullian, he coins the word Trinity, but he didn't believe that Jesus was equal to the Father. His views were not completely orthodox, were not completely in sync with what would be hammered out at the Council of Nicaea. Neither would Origen, who's a century later, who's a 3rd century church father, so it's not even a century, who's further struggling with what exactly is Jesus. But Jesus is not equal to the Father. And only when we get to the 4th century do we have this further development that Jesus was fully God, and that becomes the orthodoxy of the church following the Council of Nicaea. So it shouldn't surprise you at all when in the same book of John, and I'm using John because I want to steelman this, appealing to the 4th gospel because I want to use Christian literature that features the highest Christology, where Jesus says to Mary Magdalene, don't hold on to me because I have not ascended yet to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. It means Jesus calling Mary's God his God. Okay? So the doctrine of Trinity is highly contradictory. No Christian can really explain it. To their credit, most Christians do not understand it. Actually, no one can understand it because there's a contradiction. Is X equals Y and X doesn't equal Y, because each really has a distinct hypostatic entity which the others don't share. So it really is 3 divine beings. It's not one. But most Christians simply use modalistic metaphors to describe it, which is complete heresy. They really don't get it. It takes centuries for the church to work this out, but it should not surprise you to look at the Christian Bible and discover that Jesus is completely subordinate to the Father. Okay, thank you for your thoughtful question.
If you enjoy this channel and the content, and it has changed your life, or perhaps the life of a loved one or a close friend, would you please consider supporting this work? You can click this link and it'll take you directly to my website with the donate button. Or there's a Patreon link and a mailing address for snail mail if you would prefer. If you do donate, please do me a favor and leave me a phone number where I can contact you and thank you properly. I hope you all have a wonderful 2025. Shalom.